situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying with us. It's Daybreak on Trust TV. Time for us to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak this morning. And we'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. The lead story talking about the Sudan crisis. It says 4,000 Nigerian students stranded as FG tarries on evacuation. It has the riders that says our lives at risk. We are consulting, Diaspora Commission says. Regional global forces behind crisis, General Aguai. You'd find the details on page 4. Now, you have also above the lead story, Tinubu appoints Onanuga, Marwa, 11 others into Presidential Inauguration Committee on page 4. Eid al-Fitr, Buhari, Tinubu, Atiku, Lawan, Gbajabiamila seek peace, patriotism on page 7. Also, Binani Saga, Buhari approves REC suspension, orders probe of security operatives on page 6. Now you also have below the lead story, Nigeria's oil reserve drops to 36.9 billion naira, beg your pardon, 36.9 billion barrels as gas rises. Okay, so I'm right, 9 billion naira. On page 19, you have also FG concessions on its port for 30 years, and that's also on page 19. U.S. Congress moves to recognize Ramadan and Eid. So these are the stories on the front page of Daily Trust this morning.
All right, we move on to this day newspaper this morning, and there with the major headline, Buhari orders immediate suspension of Adama REC, directs IG of police to prosecute embattled officer if found liable, seek investigation of DSS NSCDC officials. Falana, Binani is culpable, should be investigated. Insists that assessment speech confirmed she was party to illegal announcement. Urges NBC to sanction NTA for airing her acceptance speech.
All right.
We also have other headlines there. Daybreak, Nigeria's oil reserve fell by 0.22%, gas pool rise by 0.10% in 2022. Says upstream investment declined 74% in 8 years, establishes energy transition and carbon monetization unit. To other stories, Access Holdings posts 15 trillion total asset and gross earnings there by the bank rises to 1.4 trillion. President in Salah message says 2023 polls so transparent his party lost grounds in many states. Interesting. And to other stories, Tinubu replies Presidential Transition Council submits 13 names to inauguration subcommittee. These are the major stories on the front page of this day newspaper.
All right, now let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. On the Punch newspaper, the lead story, still talking about Sudan, the Sudan conflict. It says 1,262 Nigerian students demand evacuation, 330 residents killed. Now you have Nigerian students fill forms for airlifting Uganda, Tanzania rescue nationals, 3,200 injured as outage. Food, water scarcity hit Khartoum, says WHO. You also have above the Punch, above the masthead, that is, Buhari suspends Adama REC, orders security agents probe. IOCs moved $21 billion investment to other countries, says federal government. Military will ensure peaceful handover May 29, says DHQ. Below the pictorial there, well, the pictorial basically is about moon sighting in Saudi Arabia. You have Muslims mark Eid al-Fitr Friday. National Assembly inducts lawmakers select May 7. Banana Island developer planned to rake in 22 billion naira revenue, according to report. Ogun community 1-year blackout lingers over IKEDC, IBEDC disagreement. So these are the main stories on the Punch this morning.
We move on to First News newspaper this morning. Still staying with the president. Adamawa Buhari approves REC suspension, prosecution, or the securities chief's probe. Directs IGP, DSS, DG, NSCDC boss to investigate their officers' role in aiding abating REC's conduct. To other stories there on First News, leadership tussle stirs disquiet in Onaneze, in Dibu. As Elders Council disown Iwanyao as President General, declares his emergence illegal. To other stories there, right by the name Max Salah message, I am ready to work with all Nigerians, Tinubu seeks more patriotism. And to other windows there on the front page, INEC denies Binani's claim of collusion with Adamawa government, declares her claim as mischief fabrication. Tinubu transition will be peaceful, Defense Headquarters assures Nigerians. And Presidential Committee, Tinubu appoints Yaradua Kyari on Onuga orders. Two other stories right there at the bottom. Obese supporters who caused tear at Abuja airport remanded in prison. Insecurity, you have failed woefully. Autumn hits back at Buhari. And jollof rice condiments prices increase by 7%, according to the NBC report. Interesting development and tracking around jollof rice there by the First Nation newspaper. And those are the major headlines on the front page of First News this morning.
All right. On this Nigeria this morning, we have the lead story talk about Buhari Autumn in verbal exchange over Benue killings. Governor accuses President's aide, Garba Shehu, of speaking for Fulani militia. Autumn, a failed governor, rejected by his people. You also have, beside the pictorial, there will be seamless handover on May 29, the DHQ, that's Defense Headquarters. 501 terrorists surrender as troops kill 54, arrest 117 in 2 weeks. We are working to prevent flooding this year, Niwa boss Mogalu assures. INEC denies partisanship in Adamawa supplementary poll. Buhari approves immediate suspension of REC. Probe Binani, says Falana. These are the stories on the front page of this day, Nigeria. This Nigeria.
All right. To leadership on Friday. We have the major story, 39 days to go. Military dismisses threat of bandit attack on May 29th. Says there will be smooth transition, denies supporting headers killing in Benue, and asks intelligence agencies to expose terrorism finances. Two other stories there, Eid Filtry, Buhari, governors, Sultan, others preach peace and tolerance. Yaradua Kyari, 21 others make inauguration committee list. Flood sweeps boy, rainstorm kills 6, injure others in Delta. And FG disburses 45.3 billion to lift more Nigerians out of poverty. Adamawa PMB others probe of dramatic declarations. These are the major stories on the front page of Friday leadership.
All right. On Nigerian Tribune this morning, Adamawa poll is the focus. The lead story says Buhari approves suspension of REC, orders probe of security officers. You also have we didn't compromise process. INEC counters Binani, probe allegation of 2 billion naira bribe. Falana task EFCC, ICPC, and that's on page 5. You also have beside the pictorial, bandits have taken over 6,000 square kilometers of our land. So Kapu. Inauguration, Kyari, Marwa, Onanuga, 11 others make Tinubu's list. Rainstorm kills 6, sweeps boy away in Delta. Gunmen kill 2 immigration officers, university lecturer in Taraba. Naira redesign. We lost 50 billion naira to egg gluts, poultry farmers. wants FG to mop up 15 to 20 million crates of eggs, says 25 million jobs on the threat in poultry subsector. Shawwal moon sighted in Nigeria. Sudan declares today Eid al-Fitr. You are more responsible for Benue killings or Tom Blast presidency. And $2.4 billion crude oil probe, Malami, set to provide comprehensive report. These are the main stories on the Nigerian Tribune.
And to the Nigerian News Direct, the major story here is slightly different. PIA implementations, NNPC targets $50 billion investments to unlock potentials. Attributes growth of FDIs to PIA implementations. And to other stories there, Access Holdings announced 1.4 trillion gross earnings. Nigeria immigrations withdraws suits against Seplat Energy, and court judgment 1.49 trillion debt threatens Union Bank stability. Two other stories there. May 29th inauguration, Tinubu make more nominations into transition committee. Lagos State pays 5 billion accrued pension pledges safe retirement and welfare. Herbalist allegedly tortures staff's 2 biological children to death in Ogun. And an allegation of monetary inducement of Supreme Court justices, Osun APC cautions Timmy Frank. So the major stories on the Nigerian News Direct.
All right. On the Guardian newspaper this morning, the lead story: despite express centers, corruption, racketeering hobble passport application process. We also have Eid al-Fitr. Continue Ramadan values, be modest, vigilant. Sultan, IGP, DSS tell Nigerians. Adamawa poll, INEC denies partisanship as Falana urges NBC to sanction NTA. India, Nigeria, top in children lacking single routine vaccination. So this is that's all for the Guardian newspaper.
And that's the number of papers we have for you this morning. We will take a short break. When we return, we'll bring you analysis from the front page. Please stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that they look at the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
That's great. It's good to see you.
documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, thank you for staying with us. It's Daybreak on Trust TV, reaching you from the nation's capital right here, Abuja. Time for us to take a look at, some of the perspectives to the stories that we have this morning on our papers. We have Kehinde Amodu, our in-house analyst, to talk about some of the stories with us here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome. Well, very interesting stories this morning that we are seeing. One that is virtually everywhere is the president's directive for a probe into this Adamawa saga. But before we go to that, I would like for us to start with the headline on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning, talking about the Sudan crisis. This is a country where we have quite a number of students there. A total of about 10,000, but because some of them are on holidays, we are talking about 4,000 students now stranded in Sudan, calling for NIDCOM to come to their rescue at a time like this where the country is in flames, if you like. Quite a lot really going on. Other countries are also making frantic efforts to evacuate, their students. But looking at the crisis itself, yesterday we had General Martin Luther Agwai, former Nigeria Chief of Defense Staff, talk about the complications of this conflict. This is a country that, we thought, okay, with the 2011, secession between the South Sudan and Sudan itself, things would a bit be stable, but that hasn't happened yet. Instead, we've continued to see how certain forces try to force themselves on the people of Sudan. What do you make of what's happening there?
Well, really, I think what this has come down to is what the former president, Omar al-Bashir, set into place. Because basically, he was the one that funded the militia, then known as Janjaweed, that started the first Darfur crisis. Now it's that militia that has grown so strong that is almost as strong, or if not stronger, than the national military, that is now challenging the national military and the interim leader, because we can't call him a full leader. He's not a civilian president, he's a military president. Incidentally, funny enough, both the leader of the RR, the Rapid Response Forces, and the present military government worked together to ease Omar al-Bashir out of the picture. And now there's been this confrontation between them. And it seems as if it's going to be a fight to the finish. A lot of people just say that the Sudan crisis keeps on evolving, mutating every day. We had a former ambassador come on Trust TV the other day to say that the reason why the crisis seems to fester is that the leaders are not honest with the people. And I think that is basically what is happening in Sudan. So this is a fight to the finish between the leader of the militia and the interim president.
All right. You said two things that are instructive to me. You talked about the mutation of the fight. And you also alluded to the fact that this is slightly over the spoils of war. They've ousted al-Bashir, but who controls the spoils of war becomes. But what's more worrying to me in all of this analogy is the closeness of Sudan to the country Nigeria. We know how much this country or this government blamed the proliferation of small arms in Nigeria to the crisis in Libya, which is even further away from Sudan. We have far more closer ties, proximity to Sudan than we have to Libya. What do you think the implication of this will be to what is already a precarious situation in Nigeria's northeast, on the one hand? And the second one is what appears to be a lackadaisical approach to efforts by the Nigerian government to evacuate over 4,000 citizens. I mean, if a Uganda can swing into action, I wonder what more studying of the situation we seem to be doing, whether or not they are privy to some information that we are not, that we seem to still be evaluating until only God knows when before we go for our citizens who are trapped in this crisis. What do you make of those statements?
I think let me start from your last question, which is about institutions. There are too many institutions in the country. You have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then you now have a Nigerian Diaspora Commission. And sometimes there is a clash of functions between the two bodies. There is nothing stopping Nigeria from immediately, swinging into action when this crisis was at the small stages, when it hadn't erupted into something that we have now. But that's what we have. Eventually, everybody will start, exchanging blames between themselves. But really, it's not okay that Nigeria has not actually evacuated its citizens from when, it's not as if other countries have not been doing it. So this should have been a warning signal to the authorities in Nigeria that let's do this for our people. But, we like waiting until the last minute. Then, the proximity of Sudan to Nigeria, you could see that by the number of students that are studying in Sudan, 10,000 or more. And the closeness of the, can we say, cultural and colonial ties, because Sudan was also colonized by the British. So I think that is why it's easier for there to be cross-fertilization between both countries. We're already seeing the effects of that conflict, because the Sudan has never really been at peace. I think the former ambassador that came here to Sudan said that Sudan only, since 1956, Sudan has only enjoyed 11 years of peace. You understand? So it's been conflict one after the other. That is why, despite the fact that people tend to look down on Nigeria, Nigeria actually is what you consider the leading country or the so-called giant of Africa. Because when these conflicts happen, Nigeria absorbs the shocks. You see a lot more migration across the border to Nigeria, which seems to be the big country in sight. I say you see them coming. You see, and so Nigeria continues to absorb the shock. And that is why when people talk about Nigeria's military and sneer, they don't understand the kind of position Nigeria holds in the sub-region, in the West African sub-region. Everybody, even when Chad was making all these overtures and trying to show that it was fighting Boko Haram and everything, and the former Chadian leader, now dead, was leading troops into war and all that. Who was the hidden hand behind success? Nigeria.
Exactly. Talking about hidden hands, in our interaction with General Martin Luther Agwai, he says that it will take global cooperation. And global, it means the AU, the UN, and, even in the countries from the Middle East and others, to bring stability in Sudan, because there is also the conversation about both parties now, the warring parties in Sudan, having allies across the borders of the country who have taken sides, with them, and all that. So if you look at that, how complicated does it make, bringing an end to this conflict, looking at the interest of the other partners, international community in Sudan?
it's often better for conflict not to start, because then you have control of your territory. Immediately conflict starts, you have the gun runners that will come in. Then countries with strategic regional interest will come in. So, like in the Sudan face-off now, we have France, we have the US somewhere in the back, we have Russia, you understand? And then we even have African, we even have African countries contributing, Egypt and all that. So, you know, that is why when people talk about war, they don't really understand the implications of the war, because once the conflict starts, a lot of people will put their hands in the pie for, you know, all their selfish interests. So yes, you know, the Major General Martin Luther Agwai, well, he was a former chief of defense staff, so he knows what he's talking about.
Absolutely. We're running out of time, but I'd like you to speak on another story that also made the front page, which would be what appears to be skeletal service since commencing operation between Abuja and Kaduna. I'm talking about the Abuja-Kaduna rail service. What all the government has said, that operation has become a shadow of itself. And these are two very important cities that are connected, and hopefully that would extend to Kano once the Kano leg is connected to Kaduna. What exactly do you think is happening with what needs to be done on that corridor as a way of reinforcing governance on that corridor? We appear to want to do it, and we are not interested in doing it. We are back. We are not back. What do you make of all that is going on that lane?
I think in the first place, you understand, the test run might have been premature. Yes, all the facilities were in place, but nobody was thinking about security until security became the issue. You know, when the rail line was complete, and the former minister came to announce that services were resumed, we asked him a very, very important question. That rail line is supposed to be fenced. And one of the earliest incidents we had on that rail line was the train running into cattle. You understand? And his response then was that of course it would be fenced, but that is why the rail line would not run at maximum speed starting off, and we have stayed there. Then the insecurity issues now cropped in, and so it's difficult to keep security on a stretch in which the modern security components are not there. There was supposed to be digital surveillance along that line, and I think somewhere along the line the former minister and the Federal Executive Council didn't agree on the amount of money or the need for it, and of course he was very bitter about it then, especially when the security breach happened. And he said, well, this is what he said about that time, and people are disagreeing with him. I think they said he should represent his memo in council. So that issue will continue to be there. The point about it is that we shouldn't run away from the fact that there is a security situation along that route. And if it is not contained, there will always be danger to the rail line. And that's a fact.
Okay. Quickly, no more time, but we'll have to take this just quickly. The president has now given his own endorsement, or I'll say a nod, to the suspension of the resident electoral commissioner in Adamawa State. You know, and we've had INEC also countering some of the allegations raised by the APC presidential governorship candidate in Adamawa, Aisha Binani, about some national commissioners coming to Adamawa and the rest of them. What do you make of this? What's your take, quickly?
The president had no choice. Whatever the stories are behind the scene, he had no choice to maintain integrity of the process. in maintaining integrity of the entire electoral process. Because we are projecting, what it now happens is that you project from one incident to the entire incident that happens. And don't forget, there are already problems with the integrity of the elections. So there is no, everybody, you're fortunate, it's a very funny situation. Everybody has distanced himself from the resident electoral commissioner, including the person that benefited from it all, because she's now blaming INEC and saying INEC met with PDP officials, blah, 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 and so everybody is trading blame. I'm trying to understand, what was he thinking? And what kind of backing did he think he had before he would make that kind of pronouncement?
Well, we would continue to follow that and see what comes out of it. Even the security operatives are also not spared in the whole interrogation, the DSS and the Niger police who were there.
Because they were seated there.
Yes, so so it seems like there's a suspicion of being complicit in this whole thing. But we'll see how it all pans out. This is the much we can take on this segment of the program. We'll take a short breather. We'll be back top of the hour to take a look at the headlines and have much more analysis and discussions on other issues. Join us again.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that